All right, ready to dive into a mystery, one that's had folks scratching their heads for over a century. The Voynich Manuscript.
Yeah.
You said in a whole mountain of articles and research, so let's see if we can maybe make some sense of it together.
It's one of those things that really, really makes you rethink what we know about language, about history.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And to start, what is this Voynich Manuscript? What's got everybody so intrigued?
Picture this. A book, a little smaller than, say, your average paperback, bound in goatskin.
Fancy.
Oh, yeah.
How?
Written on vellum. That's, really high-quality parchment. Calfskin.
Okay.
About 240 pages, give or take, maybe a few missing. And the whole thing, filled with this crazy, totally unknown script. And these illustrations, so detailed, colorful.
It's the illustrations that really get you.
Right.
Like weird plants, all these symbols, figures, nymphs, I've heard people call them. Like something out of a dream, almost.
Exactly. They're not what you'd expect. And that makes the whole thing even more mysterious. And then there's the script itself, completely indecipherable. Uses about 20 to 25 different characters, no punctuation that we can, recognize.
So how'd this even end up, like, on people's radar? Researchers and all?
Well, the earliest owner we know of, this guy, Georg Beresch, an alchemist from Prague, way back in the 1600s.
Wow.
He was already trying to figure it out, even reached out to this Jesuit scholar, Athanasius Kircher.
No luck, I'm guessing.
Nope. Fast forward a few centuries, it lands in the hands of a book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich. That's where the name comes from.
Uh-huh.
He also tried to, crack it. That's when it really started getting attention.
So Voynich is like, like a book hunting Indiana Jones. Stumbles across this ancient thing.
Kind of, yeah. Carbon dating puts it in the early 15th century, probably made in Italy during the Renaissance.
Hold on. The Renaissance, wasn't that supposed to be like the time of, knowing things? You'd think a book from then wouldn't be so, mysterious.
Right. That's what makes it so intriguing. Something from this time of, intellectual growth. And it's talking to us in a language we don't understand.
Okay. So let's talk about that language. What are the main theories about what this Voynichese, I think they call it, could be?
Well, there's a lot out there, some more practical, some, pretty out there. One big one is it's a code, some kind of cipher.
Right.
Code breakers have tried, but the thing is none of the typical ciphers from the 15th century seem to fit.
But there's a twist, right? This verbose cipher thing.
Right. Some researchers think maybe instead of directly coding the letters, they're using groups of fake letters. It's like Roman numerals, but way more complicated and intentionally confusing.
So instead of, say, IV for 4, you'd have this whole string of random characters that actually just stand for IV.
Exactly. Not easy to figure out.
Okay, so maybe not a straightforward code. Could it be a real language then? One we just don't know yet?
That's another one that people are looking at. When they do statistical analysis, they actually find patterns that look like natural language.
Really? So what are the top contenders?
Oh, there's a whole list. Hebrew, Nahuatl, that's the language of the Aztecs.
Okay.
Even a North Germanic dialect. Or a Turkic language. Some think it could even be Proto-Romance, like an ancestor of French or Spanish.
Like a missing link in the language family tree.
Yeah. Each theory has, its good points, its bad points. Lots of debate. And that's what's so great about this whole thing. You see these theories pop up, get challenged, get refined.
It's like a linguistic detective story. Some of these articles even talk about the possibility of a constructed language. Something totally made up like Tolkien with his Elvish languages.
Now that one is really something. A constructed language would mean somebody made this whole thing up on purpose. But why? Why create a language just to, hide it?
Maybe for a very, very select audience.
Could be. But then we have to think about the other side, the something else theories.
All right, give me the wild cards.
One of the big ones. It's a hoax. A fake. Somebody made it to mess with people.
Okay.
There are techniques like the Cardin grill, that can make those complex patterns that look like language.
So like a 15th century con artist playing the long game.
Right. But some people say the patterns are just too complex, way too intricate to just be made up.
So not a simple hoax, if it is one. And then there's the glossolalia thing.
Glossolalia, yeah. Like speaking in tongues, somebody's making language-like sounds, or in this case, writing, but without any real meaning.
Right.
This theory gets some support because, the manuscript, it kind of looks like art made during those, altered states of consciousness.
So like a form of artistic expression, but not meant to be understood in the usual way.
Right. Fascinating, but like all the others, it's hard to say for sure.
All right, so we've got codes, we've got real languages, fake languages, trance writing. What about actual attempts to decipher this thing? You sent me some articles about some of the notable ones, starting with William Newbold. Intriguing, but didn't quite pan out, did it?
No. He was convinced it was the work of Roger Bacon, this 13th century friar, known for his scientific writing, philosophy.
Okay.
He thought there were tiny markings hidden inside the letters, like ancient Greek shorthand.
A secret message inside a secret message. Talk about deep.
Right. And he said some illustrations showed things like galaxies, things they couldn't have known about without telescopes, way later.
So ahead of his time. But the theory didn't hold up, huh?
No. Other researchers showed his interpretations were pretty subjective, didn't really stand up to, real scrutiny.
The allure of a good story. But Newbold's attempt was just the beginning, right? There were tons of others, each with their own approach, their own controversies.
Oh, tons. It shows you how much this thing has captured people's imagination. It's like a puzzle everybody wants to solve.
A puzzle everyone wants to solve.
And that makes you think. Even if it's a hoax, why has it kept so many smart people busy for, over a century?
Yeah, that's a great point. Why is an undeciphered text so important even if it's a fake?
Well, even if it's a hoax, it makes us think differently about language, about codes, about, the human need to understand things. Just the fact that it exists forces us to question what we think we know.
Like it's showing us something about ourselves, about our own need to figure things out.
Exactly. And you know what? Even if we never figure out what it means, trying to has led to some real discoveries. Techniques in linguistics, cryptography, even artificial intelligence, all because of this book.
So the journey itself, the trying to understand, has been valuable, even without a clear answer at the end.
Right, and that's something to think about if you're looking into the Voynich Manuscript. The value might not be in the meaning itself, but in what we learn along the way.
Which makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about the answers, but about the questions, the journey.
Exactly. Speaking of the journey, there's another aspect to this we haven't gotten into yet. The attempts to decipher the Voynich Manuscript. Some of them are almost as crazy as the manuscript itself.
Now you're talking. Let's hear about those.
Okay, so back in the 1940s, there's this guy, Joseph Martin Feely. He thought it was, you guessed it, a diary by Roger Bacon.
We're back to Bacon.
He thought Bacon wrote it in some kind of secret shorthand based on abbreviated Latin, hidden scientific knowledge tucked away in this crazy book.
I love it, but I'm guessing other scholars weren't buying it.
Not so much. They questioned his methods, and that shorthand theory, it pretty much got tossed out.
Another one bites the dust. But what about this Lionel Strong? I think I saw he linked the manuscript to this 16th century English writer, Anthony Ascham.
Right, Strong. He was a cancer researcher, but he was really into cryptography.
Okay.
He thought the Voynich Manuscript was using this super complicated system, alphabets, math. His decipherment said Ascham was the author.
So we've gone from a 13th century friar to a 16th century author. Things are getting complicated. It feels like we're all over the map with the timeline for this manuscript.
Yeah, and that's one of the trickiest parts, without knowing who wrote it, when they wrote it, verifying any solution is almost impossible.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle without knowing what the picture is supposed to look like.
Exactly. Okay, get this. One of the articles even mentions steganography. You ever heard of that?
Steganography. Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
Think of it like hiding a message within another message, like invisible ink for words.
So the idea is the actual text in the Voynich manuscript means nothing, but it's hiding another message, like encoded in the way the text is laid out or something.
That's it. Something the real message could be in the length of the pen strokes, the shape, how the words are arranged on the page.
Tricky. But wouldn't that be like impossible to decode, even if you knew what you were looking for?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why steganography is so hard to prove or disprove. The message could be hidden so well you'd need the exact key to even know it's there.
It's like treasure hunt with an invisible map. So where are we at? Codes, languages, hoaxes, and now hidden messages. It sounds like every theory has its fans and its doubters.
That's the thing about it. It's like a blank canvas, and everyone can project their own ideas onto it. And like we said, even if we never figure it out, the process itself is valuable.
A reminder that sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. Now, one of the articles threw in a real curveball. It mentioned this guy, Sidney Riley, a real spy, had some connection to the manuscript. Who is this guy?
Sidney Riley, the ace of spies, a legendary figure. His life was like a mix of truth and fiction, so much mystery around him.
Okay, so now we've got a real spy involved. This is getting good. How does he tie into the Voynich Manuscript?
This BBC article says he was friends with Wilfred Voynich, the book dealer. And get this, records show Riley was studying ancient inks at the British Museum around the same time Voynich got the manuscript.
That's suspicious. Almost too perfect.
Right. It lends itself to this theory that Voynich might have actually forged the manuscript.
Hold up. The guy who brought the Voynich Manuscript to everyone's attention might have actually made it. That's a big claim.
It is. But Voynich was a book dealer, you know? He'd know how to make a good fake. And if he had Riley helping him with access to all those inks and stuff.
It's like a spy movie, you know? Secret codes and mysterious manuscripts, double crosses. But if Voynich created it as a forgery, wouldn't that mean it's all, like, made up? There's nothing to decode.
That's what some researchers say. And the fact that we don't know where the manuscript was before Voynich got it makes people suspicious.
It's like a game of historical telephone, where the story changes with every retelling.
Yeah.
But other sources say the forgery idea is bogus.
Right. Especially because of the carbon dating of the vellum. You got it. Carbon dating says the vellum is from the early 15th century. Voynich couldn't have faked that. He might have been a smart book dealer, but he couldn't mess with the laws of physics.
Science ruins a good spy story. But the BBC article, it also mentions another theory linking the manuscript to Roger Bacon, right?
Yeah, but that mostly comes from a letter Voynich supposedly found inside the manuscript. A letter supposedly from the 17th century that said the manuscript was owned by Emperor Rudolph II and that people thought it was Bacon's work.
A letter inside the mystery book, pointing to a famous figure. This is like those Russian nesting dolls. But is there any truth to it?
Most researchers think the Bacon connection is a bust. No solid proof, and some think Voynich might have planted that letter to make it seem more mysterious, more valuable.
So another theory bites the dust. Looks like we're back to square one with who wrote this and what it means.
Yeah, in a way, but every theory that gets debunked helps us narrow down the possibilities.
Right.
And even the weird ones can trigger new research and new ideas.
It's like eliminating things one by one until, hopefully, we're left with what makes the most sense. But let's change gears a bit. Let's talk about the Voynich manuscript as, well, an actual thing. A book. Some of the articles really go into the materials it's made of, the illustrations, how the whole book is laid out.
Right. Its physical form is just as fascinating as the mystery of what it says, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just one single bound book. It's actually several quires, basically folded sheets of parchment that are gathered and sewn together.
So like chapters in a book.
Exactly. And just like chapters, these quires, they seem to be arranged by topic. You find sections that look like they're about plants, about astronomy, the human body, even what looks like a map of the cosmos.
So even if we can't read the words, we can get some clues about what it's about from the illustrations and how it's organized.
Exactly. And the illustrations themselves are like a treasure trove of information. Even if we don't fully understand them, they give us insights into whoever made this. They knew about botany, astronomy, anatomy.
And that knowledge, the articles say, lines up with what people knew back in the 15th century. That makes the case that it's a real product of that time, not some modern fake.
For sure. The illustrations plus the structure help us weed out some of the bad theories. You know, if someone says the book is about alchemy, but the pictures are all plants and diagrams of the body, then, well, we can probably rule that out.
It's like a visual fact check. It helps us sort through all the different theories. Now, one of the articles, The Strange Quest to Crack the Voynich Code, really talks about how technology has changed things for people trying to decode the manuscript. How's tech helping with this mystery?
That's a whole other fascinating part. The fact that computers are so powerful now, it's been huge for studying languages. They can create digital copies of the Voynich script, then use these algorithms to look for patterns, potential language structures, even compare it to known languages.
Like using a digital magnifying glass to look at the text, finding things you couldn't see with just your eyes.
Right. Some are even using artificial intelligence now. They train these algorithms to see patterns in language and then set them loose on the Voynich manuscript.
That's wild. It's like we're using all the best tech we have on this ancient mystery. But the article also says, even with all that, the Voynich manuscript isn't giving up its secrets easily.
Nope. Some researchers think we might never decipher it.
Oh.
Maybe it was written by someone so different, so far outside our understanding of language that we'll just never get it.
That's kind of exciting and kind of frustrating to think there's this knowledge, this story locked away forever.
Right. But even if it stays undeciphered, it'll keep inspiring us to push the limits, to come up with new tools and ways of thinking, and to approach the unknown with curiosity.
That's a great point. It reminds us that there's still mysteries out there, things that challenge us, make us use our imaginations. But for now, let's look at some of those newer attempts at deciphering it, the ones using all this technology. What are some of the highlights?
One that caught my eye was this computer scientist, Greg Kondrak, University of Alberta. Okay. He and his student, Bradley Hauer, they used a machine learning algorithm that they trained on tons of translations of the same text.
So they basically taught a computer to recognize patterns in language and translation. That's incredible.
Exactly. And their analysis, they think the Voynich Manuscript could be Hebrew, but all jumbled up and written in this weird, unknown script.
Hebrew. Wow. Seems like every researcher has their own favorite candidate for the language.
That's part of what makes it so interesting. It's a blank slate. Everyone brings their own ideas to it. But what about proto-romance? That one pops up a lot, even though it's been, well, controversial.
Yeah, what's the deal with proto-romance?
Well, back in 2019, this guy, Gerard Cheshire, claimed he'd cracked the code in like 2 weeks. Said it was written in proto-romance, this theoretical ancestor of the Romance languages.
2 weeks. For a mystery that stumped people for over a century.
I know, right? Well, a lot of people were skeptical. Even the University of Bristol retracted a press release they'd put out about his work.
Ouch. What was wrong with this theory?
Experts in medieval languages said there were some serious problems. He seemed to already have an idea of what the text meant, and then just picked evidence to fit that idea, instead of letting the evidence lead him to a conclusion.
Classic confirmation bias.
Right. And this is important about the Voynich Manuscript. It's easy to get carried away, to miss inconsistencies or problems when you really want a solution.
It's a good lesson for anyone who wants to crack this code.
Yeah.
You need enthusiasm, but you also need to be careful, skeptical.
Absolutely. Even the best and brightest can make mistakes, especially with something as complicated as this.
Speaking of bright minds, Andreas Schinner used a very different approach. I think he applied statistical methods to the text instead of trying to decipher words or letters.
Yes, Schinner. Very interesting, because he was looking at the statistical qualities of the text, not the meaning.
Okay.
He used math, random walk mapping, to analyze how the characters and words were arranged.
So instead of figuring out what specific words meant, he was looking for patterns in how they were laid out.
Right. And his conclusion: the text was probably created randomly, or, quasi-randomly. It didn't come from a natural language.
So his analysis kind of supports the hoax theory.
You could say that. It suggests the manuscript could have been made using a method that spits out complex-looking text, but without meaning. He even proposed an algorithm, something a medieval scribe could have used to create the text. It makes the hoax idea seem a little more plausible.
So we've got statistics backing up the hoax now. But I thought other researchers used similar statistical methods and came to the opposite conclusion.
You're thinking of the work done by a team in Brazil and Germany. They also used statistical analysis.
Right.
But they said the Voynich Manuscript's text was probably a real language, not just gibberish.
Hold on. So two groups of researchers using seemingly good science reach completely different conclusions about the same text.
That's right, and that's what makes this so fascinating and so frustrating. It's like a linguistic Rorschach test. People see different things depending on how they look at it and their own biases.
A linguistic hall of mirrors, reflecting back our own ideas. If even statistical analysis can't give us a straight answer, how can we ever hope to solve this?
That is the question. It keeps researchers going, keeps them fascinated and frustrated, but maybe the answer isn't about finding one solution. Maybe it's about accepting the ambiguity, the different interpretations, the fact that people are approaching this in different ways.
So the Voynich Manuscript is more of a starting point for discussion than a puzzle to solve.
Maybe. It reminds us that knowledge is a process, not an end point. And sometimes the most valuable things we learn are from the journey, not the destination.
Well put. And speaking of journeys, our look at the Voynich Manuscript has taken us through centuries, through a maze of languages and codes, even into the paranormal.
We've gone through so much information, so many theories, met some fascinating people along the way.
Yes.
And still, the big question of the Voynich Manuscript remains.
It feels like the manuscript itself is almost like a living thing.
Yeah.
Slipping away every time we try to define it, pin it down, get it to tell us its secrets.
I like that. It's like this entity that exists somewhere between language and code, between science and art, between what we know and what we don't know.
Right.
And maybe that's where its power comes from that space in between.
Yeah.
It makes us question what we think we know and accept the mystery.
It's a good reminder that there's still wonder in the world, things we haven't figured out. And seeking knowledge is an adventure, always full of surprises.
And sometimes the best discoveries aren't the things we find, but the things we learn along the way. New ways of thinking, new perspectives.
You're right. The Voynich Manuscript, whether it's a real message, a clever trick, or something we haven't even thought of yet, it's made us think outside the box, be open to what we don't know.
And in a world where everyone seems so obsessed with being certain, with having all the data, that willingness to be okay with not knowing, to just sit with a good mystery, that might be the most important thing we learn from the Voynich Manuscript.
I love that. We've covered a lot of ground, possible origins, the language, spies. Anything else you want to throw at me?
Well, there's this one article, it talks about a connection to the Aztecs.
Aztecs. We're going from like medieval Europe to Mesoamerica now.
Yeah, it's called the Nahuatl hypothesis. It says maybe the manuscript wasn't made in Europe at all, but in Mesoamerica.
So not a lost European language, but a lost indigenous American language.
Right. And that would change how we see this whole thing, how it was made, why it was made. There's some evidence, too. Some of those plants and animals, they seem to be from Mesoamerica. They even found a tachyte in the manuscript. That's a pigment. They used it more in Mesoamerica back then.
That's pretty interesting. But how does that work with the carbon dating? That said, it was from Europe.
Yeah, that's the tricky part for this theory. The folks who believe in the Nahuatl connection, they say maybe the vellum was made in Europe, but then shipped over to Mesoamerica, and they used it later to make the manuscript.
That seems like a stretch.
Yeah.
Why would European vellum end up in the hands of, Aztec scribes?
Yeah. Right. Lots of logistical questions there. Plus, the way it's written, the Voynich Manuscript, it's completely different from, any Mesoamerican writing systems we know of.
So even if the language is Nahuatl, the writing itself doesn't match up.
Another point against it. And even some Nahuatl experts, they've looked at the proposed translations. They're not convinced. It's a fun idea, but we need more to go on.
It feels like every time we're getting close to an answer, something else pops up that, changes everything.
That's what makes it so great. Keeps us guessing.
So the fact that the Voynich Manuscript is so organized, it makes it seem like it was intentionally created.
That's what a lot of researchers think. But why? Why make a new language just to hide it in a book nobody can read?
Maybe it goes back to what we were saying before. Maybe it's not about giving specific information, but expressing something through the patterns of the language itself.
A way of showing ideas visually, a symbolic language, one that speaks to us on a deeper level. Maybe we're focusing too much on the individual words.
Maybe the meaning isn't in the words, but in how they're put together, how they interact on the page.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe the Voynich Manuscript is like a work of art, a symphony of symbols. It's communicating through patterns and how it looks, not a normal language.
And that might explain why we can't figure it out. We're trying to force it into, language rules, but maybe it's something completely different. Needs a different way of seeing.
Maybe we're missing the forest for the trees.
This is really making me think about the Voynich Manuscript in a whole new way. It might never tell us its secrets, but just trying to understand it, it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah. It's made us question so much about language, knowledge, how we communicate. And it reminds us that sometimes the best discoveries, they're not about the finish line. It's about what you find along the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to everyone listening, if you're exploring the Voynich Manuscript, remember, there's still a lot we just don't know. Be open to the mystery, question what you think about communication. Maybe you'll see something that everyone else has missed.
Maybe you'll crack the code. Or maybe you'll find out there was never a code to begin with.
Happy exploring. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Voynich Manuscript. We hope you've enjoyed this journey of discovery as much as we have. It's a mystery that continues to fascinate and inspire, reminding us that there's still so much wonder and mystery left in the world. And who knows, maybe someday, someone will unlock the secrets of this enigmatic book. But until then, the Voynich Manuscript remains a testament to the power of the unknown, a challenge to our understanding, and a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is an adventure without end. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your sense of wonder alive.